We literally have acts of terror that are being promulgated from the federal government.
Yesterday, your corporation counsel was stepping in to address the issue about whether you'd go to Washington. When I reached out to the committee, I was told that the chairman of this committee, who wants you to testify about Sanctuary City, expects you to be there, and if not, they will use whatever means they have available, including subpoena power, to require you, to compel you to be there. Will you go voluntarily, or will they have to be forced to compel you?
I wish the next time you talk to the committee chair, ask him if he would be interested in doing a hearing on how reparations can transform people's lives. Just ask him, but here's what I'm getting at. This oversight committee, of all the things that they want to have sight over, they should look at the White House right now. That White House is being ran in one of the most raggedy forms of government that I've ever seen. If anybody is questioning whether or not what our country would look like had the Confederacy won, there should be no question now.
So that right there was Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson doing the only trick that he has, which of course is playing the race card. He was asked about immigration raids from the Trump administration. By the way, these raids are targeting serious criminals. One of the criminals was actually a child predator that they sent back to Thailand. Good for them for doing so. But Brandon Johnson, of course, decides to say that this is what would happen if the Confederacy won the election, and talk about slavery and all these other different ridiculous things, because he is trying to protect the illegals first and foremost, and that is what he is going to do. Now, I also want to point out that Brandon Johnson, in another press conference, when asked about the violent criminals that the city of Chicago was protecting, basically told the public, and when I say basically, I mean he quite literally told the public that it's not his job to deal with that, because safety in the city of Chicago doesn't fall at the feet of the Chicago mayor.
The people of Chicago tell me that your answers are nothing more than double talk, word salad, pre-scripted PR statements. Tom Holman showed up in Chicago and within 24 hours found a convicted sex offender who has been living in our city since 2009, flouting the sex offender registry. If he can do this, why can't you?
Because that's their job. That is their job. The federal government
job's not to keep
has
the
a
people of Chicago
responsibility
safe?
to make sure that individuals who are undocumented, who have been charged with, convicted of a crime, it is the federal government's responsibility to do their part and uphold the law. Our local police department, along with our public health department, along with our other sister agencies, are working to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And as we've stated repeatedly, those critical investments, you continue to see the results.
And this is one of the reasons why he's one of the most unpopular politicians in the entire country at this moment in time. Now, stack on top of that the recent discovery that a 63-year-old man in the city of Chicago was tied up and beaten to death by two migrants in this country illegally, one of which the city of Chicago had custody over, which we will talk about that a little bit from now, and released. And you have a bit of a disaster for Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, so of course, he's doubling down on the race card. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I will remind you that on February 15th and February 16th in Newark, New Jersey, I will be at DebateCon 5. My debate is on the 16th. The link to the tickets is in the top of the description. If you guys want to come out and see me in person, I would be happy to meet you guys.
I drive past and I walk past that house all the time. So it's kind of nerve-wracking now that something happens that close to the house.
Neighbors shaken after the murder of 63-year-old George Levin, who lived in this home in the 7600 block of West Talcott Avenue in Norwood Park. Our Chicago police sources tonight confirming they now have arrested two men who are in custody. Both are migrants from Venezuela and Ecuador, one we know in his early 20s.
So as you heard right there, the victim in this particular homicide is a man called George Levin, and this also occurred in a quiet neighborhood, and that's not only what we get from this particular woman's testimony around her neighborhood, but apparently this is an area where a lot of law enforcement officers call home. It's one of the Chicago suburbs, and this kind of thing doesn't typically happen in this particular area. But in addition to that, the working theory of the police is actually quite interesting, because according to them, Levin may have let one or both of the attackers into his home voluntarily because he might have met one or both of them on a gay dating app, which means that these particular criminals criminals were targeting people on gay dating apps, and the motivation also appears to be robbery, since they stole property from him, probably to feed their starving families, those innocent Beba Angel Aladdins. They're on welfare all day that they get from the taxpayers. So in addition to that direct theft of us through the tax dollars, they have to steal from people directly, and it just goes to show you that the left wing will sacrifice any group on the altar of migrants or transgenderism. It just so happens that this particular issue happens to align perfectly with the migrants. However, the most shocking and disgusting part about this story we have to talk about, because one of these guys was in custody as early as January 12th of this year. He could have been held, but since ICE wanted to put a detainer on him, he was released the next day.
One of the suspects found at a home in Logan Square, the other in Norwood Park, about a mile and a half from the crime scene.
Crime scene, one victim in the basement unit. His arms tied with a duct tape, legs with a extension cord.
So of course they ended up arresting the two individuals. I'll put their pictures up right here. And now as for this crime, everything is alleged against them. But I do want to point out a couple of things that aren't really clarified in this particular news segment. First and foremost, this man, George Levin, he lived in the basement of his sister's home. He had that apartment unit. So it is very likely that his sister is the one who found his body in the state that it was in and made the call into the police. What a brutal scene for you to discover, just because these illegal migrants wanted to steal property from you and they decided it was worth more than your life.
Officers responded to the victim's home around 11 p.m. Sunday night. Levin was unresponsive, found bound with duct tape and an extension cord.
In the basement. His sister found him.
According to the Chicago Tribune, Levin had been beaten and his keys, wallet, and cell phone were missing. After an autopsy, the Cook County medical examiner found Levin had died of multiple injuries, ruling his death a homicide.
Oh, so we actually do have it confirmed from this local news segment that his sister was the one that discovered his body. And remember what Brandon Johnson was saying about you guys out there in the audience who don't want American citizens to discover their relatives bound, gagged, and beaten by illegal migrants in the basement of your home. You're actually racist. You're actually horrible. And the raids that you want against these criminals, honestly, you're trying to inflict terror on the most innocent, most vulnerable, most Beba Angel portion of our society, the illegal migrant criminals. How dare you not protect them? You're absolutely disgusting. You probably wanted the Confederacy to win the Civil War, you evil white racist.
I'm actually very shocked. Ever since the violence in Chicago's kind of been creeping up, we've been more alert, aware. We've got security cameras everywhere. Our neighbors also tend to be very cautious as well, just because you never know.
Look, this lady says they have security cameras and all that stuff, but as we've seen, security cameras can oftentimes capture criminality, but many of these people don't give a damn about committing crimes in this country. In fact, a bunch of them are just defrauding the asylum system. These two individuals apparently entered the country in 2023 when Biden, of course, had the lawless open border, when Harris was the border czar, and of course he campaigned on these people surging to the border. He said that's who we are. Let me play the clip for there.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
Which, of course, encouraged asylum fraud. Biden also got rid of the Remain in Mexico policy, which said that you can't pass through a bunch of different countries on your way to the United States. You have to try claiming asylum in those countries. And by the way, you have to wait in one of those third-party countries, even if you're claiming asylum in the United States of America, because we're not just going to absorb you into our nation and then try to find you if your case gets denied 10 years down the line. And look at where they were located: Central America and in South America, Venezuela and Ecuador. If they would have stopped on their nations along the way, we wouldn't have this issue. If we had those policies in effect, this man would be alive to this very day.
Chicago police tell us that one of these suspects was recently arrested on January 12th in a child luring case involving two teenage girls, but we're told those charges were downgraded.
So right there, they end up closing the segment by telling you the charges that one of these individuals was arrested on, and this is where we get into the local government failure. So you have an illegal migrant that is arrested for luring, probably maybe through a dating app or some sort of way. They're not exactly clear about this, so this is my speculation. Let's be clear about that. Two teenage girls to a certain location or something of the sort, and then those charges were ultimately downgraded downgraded on behalf of the illegal migrant, and that person was released the very next day. And wouldn't you know it, according to these charges, according to what is alleged right now, this person appears to have lured somebody into a false sense of security, ended up robbing them and killing them. So very easily, if they weren't caught on that previous case, that might have escalated to a murder of those two teenage girls, because obviously you don't just have that savage murderous intent for one victim without possibly having that for other people. And again, I will remind you, they did this for his wallet, some of his personal property that they wanted to take from him, and what they ended up taking was somebody who is allegedly a member of the gay community, somebody who was a beloved brother because again, he lived in the basement apartment of a property that the sister owned, and she was the one who discovered his body. And for what? For the enrichment, for the fact that Brandon Johnson can pat himself on the back saying that he defeated the Confederacy by allowing this person into the country and shielding them from prosecution. It's absolutely disgusting and ridiculous. And again, these are the very people that the Trump administration is trying to get rid of. That arrested for luring, if that was actually somebody that was turned over to ICE for deportation, maybe the one person pulls off this crime, or maybe things work out differently and that man is still alive to this very day.
Authorities believe 21-year-old Jefferson Ubia Delgado and 29-year-old Guider Wuin Bello Morales killed 63-year-old George Levin at his home on Sunday night. Cameras were not allowed inside the courtroom today. However, prosecutors argued that what happened to Levin was horrifying. After receiving a call from a relative, police say they found Levin dead inside his basement, bound down with duct tape and an electric cord. He also had a sock stuffed inside his mouth. Prosecutors pointed to surveillance camera evidence showing the two suspects arriving and leaving Levin's home the night of his death. They also found duct tape inside one of the suspects' vehicles. Police say shortly after the suspects allegedly beat him, they robbed him. Levin's cell phone and wallet were missing from the scene. Prosecutors say surveillance video showed the suspects trying to use his credit card at local businesses. By tracking Levin's phone and an electronic monitoring device being worn by one of the suspects, they were able to ultimately find the two men and arrest them. The suspects' attorneys argue that despite the videos, there was no evidence to prove exactly what happened inside of the basement. They also said the suspects ended up with Levin's phone as part of a sexual favor.
Look, there's this great myth, this great lie that's often being put forward in our society, which is that illegal immigrants, they actually commit far fewer crimes than the average American. Therefore, we should not be concerned about criminality related to them. Now, this is wrong for a number of reasons. First and foremost, if they commit fewer crimes than Black Americans, who skew the average for all of America, then that still could mean that they're the second highest most criminal demographic in this country, and that's a serious problem. But in addition to that, for most crimes, even though we highlight ones that are connected to policy, there's no real way to prevent them from a law enforcement standpoint. But for illegal immigrant crimes, they all spawn from the fact that we have a lax border enforcement, lax law enforcement. And in this particular case, not only did we have this person let into the country under Biden's watch, as he promised under Kamala Harris, the border czar, but when he was arrested, when there was a point to intervene, when there was a point to turn him over to ICE, sanctuary city laws ended up protecting him. So this crime was entirely preventable with better policy, which is why we want to address it. So I don't give a damn if illegal migrants by the percentages per capita are slightly less criminal or even significantly less criminal than Black Americans. In reality, when they commit a homicide, when they commit an additional crime in this country, that is a crime that entirely could have been prevented if we had more security at our border, if we had better immigration policies, if these jurisdictions stopped protecting them, if we stopped offering them benefits. Their crimes are the result of a policy failure, which is why we should consider them different despite the fake numbers that we get, because make no mistake about it, most departments, most states don't measure immigration status at arrest, so all of those stats are bunk anyway. Now, with all that being said, I really want to know what you guys think about this whole topic down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the illegal migrant murderers in the city of Chicago. Till next time.